The tale opens with solitary swordsman Ishiki Seiya clashing against the most formidable foe in his universe. Seiya was a warrior of such immense strength that he feared no one, save for his parents. Announcing the start of their battle, he swiftly eliminated the minions of his most wicked adversary. This time, however, he wasn't alone. His reliable co-commander, Tank Kingo, stood by his side. Tank Kingo wielded fire-based powers, and once Seiya had cleared the way ahead, he seized a massive boulder and hurled it at the primary enemy. But the Overlady was no ordinary opponent. Raising her hand, she obliterated the fiery projectile. She then mocked them, calling them insignificant and warning them not to grow overconfident. Unfazed by their defiance, she unleashed a torrent of flames toward them without hesitation. Just in time, the Ice Queen intervened, conjuring an icy barrier to shield them from the blaze. Mage Hozugarai, after saving them, advised the duo to take a moment to cool down. Approaching from behind, she handed each of them a chilled elixir. Seiya remarked to the mage that while her shield was helpful, what kind of damage had they truly sustained? Suddenly, Abe's assistant, Dairo, appeared and informed the pair that healing potions were now available for both of them. Seiya responded to Dairo, praising it as an excellent solution. After consuming the elixirs, Kingo turned to Hyeth and asked if he was prepared. Hyeth emerged following Dairo's announcement, expressing gratitude to the group and declaring it was now his turn to finish the job. Hyeth charged into the fray, launching a series of devastating attacks. The demon was so taken aback that it couldn't comprehend the source of such power. The next day, shocking news spread across the city. Reports confirmed that the S-rank White Lotus Guild had vanquished the Fire Furnace Demon King. The populace erupted in celebration, hardly able to believe the guild had pulled off such an incredible feat. But their origin story still recalls that monsters first appeared roughly 200 years ago. And among them, the most powerful demon, a creature with 7 bodies, remains undefeated to this day. The chief remarked that even destroying one of its parts would be an extraordinary feat, something straight out of a fantasy. However, the warriors had chosen to visit the city that day, and the leaders announced that all members of the White Lotus Guild were present. The townsfolk were overjoyed to see their champions and cheered in celebration. Hyeth appeared on television, expressing gratitude for the unwavering support from people worldwide. Despite being S-rank hunters, they weren't immune to curiosity. Suddenly, a man approached them, asking how they had grown so strong. Hyeth decided to answer, crediting their strength to relentless daily training. After the ceremony, they visited the prison, where Seiya joked that telling everyone it was solely due to daily training was quite amusing. Kingo disagreed, saying it wasn't far from the truth. Hozugarai backed him up, adding that every day was a real challenge. It was simply part of their job, and there was no changing that. Hyeth picked up his blade and told the others it was necessary. He turned to the prisoners, addressing the most significant one, questioning if they didn't agree. In reality, he had only referred to 2 individuals as brats, Kiryu Makoto and his sister, Kiryu Mitsuri. But Hyeth quickly corrected himself, admitting it was disrespectful to call them brats. He acknowledged that thanks to them, they had grown stronger, and for that, he was deeply grateful. With a swift motion, he severed the head of one of the prisoners. Yet, he reflected that chopping plants, slaughtering animals, or killing ordinary people didn't grant experience. According to the rules of leveling up, one had to defeat monsters. However, there are exceptions to this rule. These are individuals who live without dying. When they lose a limb or suffer an injury, it heals instantly. Hyeth continued decapitating the same person repeatedly, and suddenly, the system announced that his level had increased. The man exclaimed that if you defeat those who endlessly revive, you could level up indefinitely. Excitedly, he declared that nothing could be simpler. After all, with every strike, the body parts regenerated anew. Following Hyeth's lead, the others began their leveling process. One of them was Tank, who employed fiery punches. Meanwhile, Hozugarai unleashed her magical powers on the girl, obliterating Mitsuri alive until only small bones remained. Next, Dairo's assistant took over, using his potion on the girl to continue the promotion cycle. Seiya, on the other hand, relied on the oldest method, delivering only physical blows with his fists. The system promptly informed them all that their levels had been raised, and so, throughout the night, they tormented the immortals, continuously increasing their strength. Hyeth remarked that they had achieved excellent training that day, but Tank countered, saying it clearly wasn't enough. He craved even greater power. The mage chimed in, agreeing that while Tank had immense stamina, he was still a fool. She admitted she was exhausted. Seiya, however, was content and stated that he was personally growing bored and would now go grab a drink. Suddenly, Seiya noticed something odd and asked Dairo what was wrong. The assistant replied that he hadn't been able to gather satisfactory data on poisons recently. They die so easily, he lamented. Seiya listened to the aide and remarked how serious he was, suggesting they have some fun for once. Dairo responded that he was fine and, walking over to the girl, added that he was already having enough fun as it was, though, with his doll, they had already tried nearly everything. Lately, everything felt so monotonous to him. And then, Chayat glanced at the girl and realized there was more to come. As he approached Dairo, he suggested that they could exploit the girl's pregnancy. Upon hearing this, Dairo immediately became enthralled, his excitement palpable. Dairo grew ecstatic and praised Hyeth, calling him a genius. He admitted that he too had been fixated solely on killing up until now. Dairo then requested Hozujirai to apply her hypnosis to his doll. The mage didn't refuse and complied with his demand. She aimed her staff directly at the girl and cast a spell to awaken lust within her. Upon hearing their plan, Seiya turned around and declared that in that case, he would join in as well. However, Hozujirai wasn't pleased and retorted that men were nothing but idiots. But Hyeth commanded her to release the seal on the other individual as well. Hozujirai asked in surprise why. Hyeth explained that it would be unbearably dull for the man to watch his sister being tortured right before his eyes, while he remained chained and powerless to intervene. Wouldn't such a spectacle make things far more interesting? Hozujirai released the man, replying that she understood. Makoto was astonished to find the chains broken. Turning to the side, he saw people lifting his sister and carrying her into another room. Horrified by what he witnessed, Makoto shouted for them to stop and rushed to save her. But Hyeth left him no chance to reach them, striking with the sacred spear and severing his arm. Hyeth burst into laughter, remarking how terrifying the man's expression was. He declared that today he would grant him a special place using sacred elemental magic. After all, fire and physical blows proved ineffective, but what about a unique technique designed for immortals? Makoto responded that it would hurt far more than usual, as regeneration would be significantly slower, and he swore to curse him for it, and a wretch like him will meet his end sooner or later. But Hyeth paid no heed and sliced his neck with the sword. Hyeth snapped at him to stay silent, reminding him that talking was forbidden during the show. Didn't the brats understand that? And if he intended to curse, he should curse the fact that he was born with such a body. That's right, descendant of the immortals. Afterward, Seiya told Dairo it was time to leave. He had to appear in foreign media the next day, so there would be a commotion. Before that, though, he had to remember to feed the chimera. He was the only one tending to that repulsive creature. Dairo asked, "Isn't she cute?" To which Seiya countered, "What about that brat's seal?" After all, waking Hozujirai at this hour would surely lead to their deaths. He lacked the ability to destroy iron doors, so locking the door would suffice for safety. At that moment, Makoto could only feel excruciating pain coursing through his body, leaving him unable to move. Meanwhile, Mitsuri, now freed, tried to save her brother by removing the blade from his neck. Afterward, Makoto began to see and feel the dagger being extracted from his body. In his mind, he pleaded with Mitsuri to stop, hoping she would listen. Mitsuri, utterly exhausted and weak, screamed how utterly disgusted she felt. Overwhelmed, she began cutting into her own body. A tear rolled down her cheek as she cried out how repulsed she was. She wanted to forget everything, to make it all vanish from her memory. After numerous stabs, she collapsed onto the floor, exhausted, muttering that she wanted to completely change her body. Mitsuri turned to her brother, desperately begging him to do what needed to be done to her. Of course, it would hurt far more than usual, as her regeneration would be significantly slowed. And with the sacred spear, he could finally put her out of her misery. He instructed Mitsuri to sever his limbs. Mitsuri heard her brother's orders and proceeded to cut his limbs. But Makoto realized that even with regeneration, the pain would not go away. After all, in Immortals, the ability to regenerate is only fully restored after their death. Suddenly, Mitsuri said she couldn't chop and asked her brother for forgiveness. Immortals who cannot die, do not regenerate, and cannot lose consciousness are doomed to eternal suffering. But Makoto told her to try again. Mitsuri heard her brother's request and, apologizing, tried to chop again. After a lot of work, Makoto said that well done, and all that was left was to pierce the heart and regeneration would resume. Mitsuri picked the right angle to strike and stuck the blade right into her brother's heart. Suddenly, a huge and bright light suddenly appeared, which was so beautiful that Mitsuri didn't realize what was happening. And then Makoto received a notification that his level had been promoted. Mitsuri realized it was her brother's level, but she didn't know how he had promoted her. Mitsuri asked her brother if he understood what it meant, but Makoto was frightened and answered his sister that he didn't need to. It's not a solution. Mitsuri told her brother that he misunderstood her. She wouldn't do it. The two of them would do it. Avenge them for everything they've been through here. Makoto had fully recovered and agreed with his sister, and suggested she do it too. After that, the brother and sister started killing each other, and each time, their level got higher and higher. Each time, they didn't stop or hesitate, for it was all for revenge. Abe Dairo in the guild's S-rank White Lotus group was an assistant, running all sorts of errands and carrying loads. He's shy and quiet. However, everyone who knows him says that this guy is not so simple. 3 years ago, at the moment of battle, Dairo was on top of the demon and said that he was about to connect these organs, and if this one was cut off, nothing would happen. Hito suddenly came to him and told Dairo that he was all about work, and that's not a bad thing. But wouldn't he like to explore something more interesting? Dairo asked with surprise. Something more interesting? And he doesn't usually go to this room, at the very back of the guild. But upon entering that very room, Hito told the guys that they probably don't crave fame. The guys asked Hito what he was talking about. The guy replied that from now on, the choice is up to them, and they will receive a glory that mankind could never dream of. But to do so, they will have to become prisoners of darkness from which there is no escape. And of course, it was up to them alone to decide whether to go with him or not. The tank immediately jumped up and replied that whether it was glory or darkness, their path was the same. Hito thanked them and offered to guide them to the future, which leads to glory and darkness. Dairo thought, who would have thought that there was such a huge secret cellar here? But it's also said that this place was once a prison where the force that opposed the guild was kept in confinement. But he didn't even know there could be confinement here. And even the most popular guild has its dark sides. Dairo asked the man in charge what he was even going to show them. Hiro wrote the password and told them to shut up. Opening the door, he introduced the two immortals Makoto Kuin and Mitsuri Tion to them. The boys were surprised and told him that it was wrong. But Hito told them not to worry. Outwardly, they are like normal humans, but their blood is different. And this is a brother and sister from a tribe that everyone had long ago thought was extinct. Hito decided to show them something, and pulling out his sword cut the guy's chest. The guys were shocked because they saw with their own eyes that they were regenerating. And do they really still exist? They asked. Dairo said that it was certainly amazing, but what did it have to do with fame? Hito opened his phone and replied for them to look at it. And here's the level measuring app they used when joining the guild. And it calculates rank based on the total body strength and magical energy sufficient to resist monsters. One wouldn't be allowed into the White Lotus unless he had level 20 or a rank. And then Hito revealed that he was already level 50. When the guys saw that he had level 50, they were shocked and couldn't believe their eyes. Hito said that according to the rules, you can only level up by defeating monsters, and you have to be very careful not to die. But if you take advantage of it, the level rises with unusual ease. And after stabbing the girl, his level was immediately raised. Hito turned to Dairo and asked, "Is something wrong?" The guy raised his head and replied that it was just awesome, and immediately pulled out his knife. Dairo grabbed the girl and said that he had been dreaming about this for a long time, and the structure of the human body, its contents, its organs. Dairo started cutting the girl alive and asked her to tell him how she felt, and how it felt to have his insides pulverized with a knife. And suddenly, after dismembering her, he started screaming for joy that his level had gone up. And that's fine, because he's so pleased with her. And he asked her to tell him more about herself. And she really doesn't die, no matter what happens? And how does she deal with regents and poisons? And what happens if you take away her brain? Seiya also said that if they can't actually die, then they're monsters. But if it's not a human, there's definitely no problem. The guys all started their level ups and slashed everything they saw in front of them. Hito watched and told them it was great. And they're so easy to manage, and it helps them a lot. For the moment, there was silence and idle over the world. But the team went on the flight, and Tank said he didn't think he'd be so worn out during the interview. But the magician replied that those with too much energy in them get more tired in suits. But Seiya was looking around, and not seeing Dairo asked, "Where did he go?" Hito asked back, "Wasn't he with the dolls?" And he seemed to like the new experiment. And that's how he got so much energy. Dairo at this point was already heading to the dungeon to use the girl once more. Opening the door, he yelled that he was already back and apologized for making her feel lonely. But he came in just as Makoto was stabbing Mitsuri and didn't even look away from him. Dairo was shocked when he saw this and asked him what he was doing. Don't let him touch his precious doll. And if he continued to do so, their love fruit would die. But the guys immediately turned on him, and their strength was very high. Dairo saw their energy and was shocked. Just yesterday, they were skinny and weak. And usually, if one defeats a creature whose level is equal to or lower than his, the experience one gets is negligible. But if you kill a critter whose level is higher, the amount of experience you get is multiplied. So they decided to kill each other to raise their levels. Again and again, over and over again. And this accelerated process continuously raised their levels. And after each blow, their bodies changed so rapidly. Dairo was frightened and thought, what kind of monsters are these? And anyway, he must do something. But Dairo was trapped with the bars behind him and had no choice but to run away. Dairo started laughing and said that he didn't know how they managed to get free, but it was all their territory. They didn't think it would be possible to escape like that. Dairo went to the button, and immediately his fist shattered the glass with fear and pressed it. Suddenly a dragon appeared beside him, and Dairo said that he would kill the guy so that he wouldn't even have a thought of running away. And now they could meet his chimera Tion. But Makoto wasn't even intimidated by that, and he told Mitsuri that it was time for them to start their revenge. Makoto looked at him and said it was a chimera, but Mitsuri was frightened and turned to her brother. Makoto told his sister not to be afraid and leave it to him. Dairo started laughing upon hearing his words and asked if he even realized what was going on. 2 against 1 is simply impossible to win, and told Hemura to calm down. After all, he's just food with the ability to regenerate, and he'll be sure to give him the opportunity to get plenty of them. And after all, they're just toys to draw experience points out of. And, of course, it would be better to have them chained up and silent. And it might even be fun to let Chimera have some fun with her. And I also wonder what a child from a union of Chimera and Undead would look like. But Makoto saw the look in his sister's eyes and put his hand in front of her, telling his enemy that he would pay for everything. Dairo answered him to just try it, and called food on legs at the end, and gave a wave to Chimera. Makoto had time to use his strength and dodge the attack. Eventually, the Chimera didn't stop and broke through the wall with his head. Makoto sensed that the enemy had speed and power. He hadn't expected that. But suddenly he saw a hologram appear beneath him, and out of which a knife suddenly emerged. Makoto managed to dodge, but putting his arm up injured him. Dairo showed up and told him not to run away. What's with all this unnecessary movement? But there was a skill. When going to a new level, they could sometimes get special skills. And their content varies according to profession, experience, race, and so on. And Abe Dairo's profession is a handyman. He's so named because he could do literally everything. He has skills such as item master, alchemist, monster tamer, and he has also mastered the assassin's technique. Also, his skill is creating warp portals that connect this place to other spaces. And these portals, in addition to helping you get the items you need, can be used to conduct accurate liquidations, a rare and valuable skill. And he also has combat power enough to defeat a demon king. So he was accepted into the S-rank guild. Makoto continued to fight the Chimera and was getting a bunch of wounds from his claws because he hadn't found his weak spot yet. But suddenly the Chimera used her tail and, grabbing Makoto under his legs, lifted him up and ripped out both of his arms. And after that, he threw him right into the wall, leaving behind only body parts. Dairo started laughing and said that no matter how much he leveled up, he would still be trash with the only regeneration skill. And he's just a puppet, a toy to pump them up. Mitsuru went out to look and didn't see her brother. At this point, Makoto was recovering and said that he understood everything. But Dairo was a bit surprised and said that with their level they couldn't handle him. Immediately, Dairo decided not to play with him anymore and ordered the Chimera to eat him to the ground. The Chimera heard the order and immediately opened its huge mouth and devoured the guy. Dairo told him it didn't matter how much he regenerated. He couldn't escape the Chimera. But suddenly everything changed, and Dairo was a little surprised at what had happened. The Chimera was standing over the guy at this moment and suddenly plopped down on the ground, slowly spitting out poison from its body. Dairo walked up to him and asked what was wrong with him. But Makoto said he was trying to instinctively avoid her, but there was no need for that now. Dairo got angry and yelled at the guy that he had killed her. And since he did that, he would have to die today, and he started stabbing him on both sides. Makoto told him to stop bleeding already, or Dairo had decided to die already. Dairo asked the guy, what the fuck was he even talking about? And what the fuck is that shit in his hands? Immediately, everything changed, and Dairo fell to the ground. He couldn't move from the pain and screamed that he was burning. Makoto had previously obtained the poison skill. This skill turns anything into a poisonous substance. And in this case, it's his own flesh and blood. Dairo asked how that was possible. This skill is different from regeneration. One could not obtain skills that were not unique to his race unless one trained them. Makoto asked him with surprise, train him? After all, Dairo himself had tried to poison him so many times. Makoto cut his hand open and, letting the blood drain off, said he would give him back all of his poison, and completely started watering him down. Dairo was already exhausted and was asking the guy to stop and stop doing that. But Makoto replied that they had taken away his peaceful life. Did they stop when they were begged for mercy? And if he was the only one suffering, but what they did to Mitsuri, to his sister, Makoto gave him no mercy and started beating him to death. Dairo was already at death's door and only asked for help. And then Makoto used his regeneration skill. After restoring it, Makoto asked why he did that. Makoto asked back, wasn't it obvious? His death will not appease his anger. After all, he himself had asked them before, how did it feel to have a knife turn their insides to mush? And now it was time to find out. And this is called karma. And after this day, he will understand the meaning of this word with the help of his own body. It was near evening when the team returned and, seeing the lights in the house, asked if Dairo was still having fun. Seiya replied that he was probably doing his experiments again. Hyeth said that was fine and asked the guy to get Dairo over here. After all, it was time to celebrate the victory over the Demon King. Seiya went down to the basement and, seeing all the slain creatures, asked what had happened here. Seiya walked up to the guy and asked what happened, but looking at the wall, he saw that the Immortals had written that it was retaliation. And outside the doors they left Dairo, who was completely cut up and hung from the door. But Chikaro Kingo was a martial artist and the strongest member of the White Lotus Guild. It is said of him that he is a man with a huge heart, capable of laying down his life for his associates. But only those who know him personally know that his true nature is bottomless malice hidden behind a mask of nobility. When his allies saw Kingo, they said he was really cool, and they too dreamed of having a body as strong as his someday. But Kingo told them no matter how much they practiced, they would never reach that level. Even their greatest efforts would be in vain. But this body is made by hard work, but told them to keep practicing in the same spirit. But seeing his back, they started saying that Kingo is huge as always. But the guy answered them that he wouldn't stay away either and would try his best. But Kingo knew that effort didn't always produce results right away. Still, he had said 1 year ago that if his efforts had yielded the same results, but there was no better method of training than this. After each kill, his level kept getting higher and higher. But Kingo said that just killing defenseless monsters made him stronger, and there was nothing easier than that. Recently, however, it's been taking longer and longer to raise the level, and what he believes is inevitable at this level. If he stops responding at all, the fun will turn into a chore. Every time he beats a guy to death, he asks him if he hears those words. But Kingo raised his fists in front of him and said there was no choice. We'd have to make him scream. He proceeded to go on his high kick and said that today they were able to break 200 ribs. What an accomplishment. And as he continued his beating, he asked him to try harder and scream louder. And his voice was made for screaming. After each scream, he got more and more excited and pleased, and decided after that to throw in another 100 approaches with his little sister. Currently, suddenly during practice, Seiya walked in and told Kingo that they had a problem. Kingo called everyone into the dungeon, and upon seeing Dairo's dead body, everyone was shocked. Hyeth asked, where did those two go? Seiya replied that he had no idea. When he got there, they were gone. Seiya said it was awful, and asked Hyeth what would happen if the whole world knew about them. Kingo stood in front of Dairo's body at that moment, and asked him not to leave them. But suddenly he saw that there was an open laptop underneath him, and he thought it was very strange. Looking closer, he saw all the moments of Dairo's death, how Makoto beats him, and their brother suffered very horrible torture. Hyeth pulled his blade out without thinking for a long time, but the guys saw this and asked him to stop. But the boy didn't listen to them and cut off Dairo's head. Kingo didn't like it and took the chief by his shirt and asked what he was doing. Hyeth replied that he was doing a favor. Even if he survived, it would only prolong his suffering. Seiya walked over and told Kingo that Hyeth was right. He wouldn't be able to last much longer in that state. The mage also said that Dairo had been brutally tortured and no magic could heal him. Kingo heard their words and started pounding the ground with his bare fists in anger at the loss of his best brother. Kingo couldn't believe his eyes and promised that he would kill them all and abuse them for a very long time. Seiya turned to the older man and said, "This is crazy." Hyeth came to his senses and asked the guy, "Is something wrong?" But they must announce to everyone that Dairo, the hero who saved the world, has fallen, and they must do it. Seiya replied that he understood and asked if he could start by burying him. Hyeth replied that no, and have him prepare everything for the broadcast immediately. At this time, Makoto and his sister were already in the forest and running so fast that no one would notice them. But suddenly Mitsuri couldn't hold on and fell to the ground. She said that her legs were no longer holding her up. Makoto understood and suggested she take a little break to regain her strength. Mitsuri couldn't believe it and asked if they were able to escape. Makoto replied that yes, and it was like that. Mitsuri looked up at the sky and couldn't believe that they were able to escape from that hell. Makoto comforted her and told her that everything was okay now, and this time he swears that he will definitely protect her. After a deep night, Makoto couldn't sleep, but Mitsuri was so tired that she fell asleep on his legs. Makoto asked his sister if she was asleep yet, but when he saw her eyes closed, he thought she was exhausted. But Guy thought and realized that he didn't know when these things would find them, and he had to be on his guard. Mitsuri couldn't hold back anymore either, and he wanted to sleep very badly. but he can't let that happen. Suddenly his senses didn't fail him, and felt someone running down their trail and heading towards them. Makoto immediately stood up, thinking that he can't be wrong. He can feel the presence of evil, but he realized that Mitsuri would only be safe here, and he's going to go check it out now. Climbing up the tree, he saw that there was an apartment building next to them, and he already realized that they had managed to find them, and they must be spotting him soon. After those words, that's when he felt someone plunge a knife into his throat. Going down, Makoto stood up and wondered who they even were. But he was surrounded from different sides, and all the warriors were strong. One of the mercenaries asked, "Isn't that the guy? But there doesn't seem to be a woman here yet." The mercenary got very excited and replied that 500 million for kidnapping one person. It's all so easy. The mage girl decided to suggest to them that they should finish quickly. So she used her enhancement and channeled all the energy right into the mercenaries. They were immediately energized and ready to get to work. Gromola decided to try out his enhancement and immediately flew with his bat and smashed it into the immortal's head. The thug said it was too easy, but Makoto just grabbed his head and leveled him. The others were in shock and didn't know how this had happened. The magician asked, wasn't he supposed to die? Makoto turned to them and asked if they had been sent by the guys from that particular guild, but he got nothing in response. Makoto said that whoever they were, they shouldn't believe them. After saying that, he immediately vanished from their sight. The thug was very surprised and asked his friends where the asshole had gone, but Makoto used his speed and quickly kicked him in the ass. Cutting down the biggest guy, he said that anyone who dared to show hostility, no matter who they were, would end up being his enemy. The mercenaries were not frightened by his words, and all at once climbed on top of him and cut off his limbs from different sides. But Makoto simply picked up his severed arm and leaned back on it to rebuild it, and then flew off to destroy the mercenaries. Slashing one of them and grabbing the other by the head, he began to strike hard and powerful blows. And turning around, he saw that she was the only one left. The mage was shocked and hadn't expected it, but she didn't lose her head and used purple lightning. Makoto couldn't react and took it all on himself. The mage was happy and said that no matter how fast he was, he couldn't avoid being struck by lightning. But when she looked in front of her, she saw that he was still intact. She started sending attack after attack and asking who he was. But even after those fiery attacks, Makoto simply stood up and headed towards her with slow steps. The mage got scared and started to run away. But Makoto told her that he wouldn't let her get away. And after all that, he took off their clothes and hung them all on a tree. Makoto looked down at himself after he had changed and saw that he looked pretty good, and he had kept them alive after all, so it was a small price to pay. Immediately afterward, he headed for his sister. But coming under the tree, she opened her eyes and saw her brother. Makoto apologized for waking her up. The sister replied that she hadn't and that it was fine. But where did the brother manage to get those clothes? Makoto replied that some kind people had given it to him. Mitsuri asked with surprise, seriously? And that's even great. Makoto decided to please his sister and said he had clothes for her too. And after she's changed, it's time to move out. As they set out, Makoto realized that they needed to get as far away as possible, then they wouldn't find them right away. Makoto looked around under the waterfall and suggested to his sister that they rest for a bit. Under the waterfall, the boys set up a fire to warm up a bit. Mitsuri, seeing the gift from her brother, was very happy because appetizers are the thing she loves the most. Makoto told her to have a nibble, but really, there wasn't much of it at all. Mitsuri replied that she was grateful to her brother. The boy realized that those who attacked them had only weapons and some food and no important information. After that, he made up his mind and told his sister that he would go into town and try to find out something and get some food. Let her stay here and wait for him. Mitsuri didn't want to be alone, but she didn't have a thief, so she agreed. Makoto went out into the city right after the forest, and he was so happy and surprised because this world was incredible. He never would have thought that the gear he sold was worth a fortune. But with this, he would be able to buy food from Mitsuri. After the job was done, he came to the park and wondered what he should do next. But he remembered that Dairo was just cannon fodder. But the others are the real demons, and to get them into hell for sure, he has to learn their weaknesses. But suddenly raising his head, he saw a ship in which he recognized the guys who were bullying them. The guys went live with the whole city, and Hito started saying that Dairo was their irreplaceable comrade, supporting them. And in the end, they were brutally tortured, and then their lives were taken. And now they will never forgive those who dare to kill Dairo. People began to panic and shout that this was madness and cruelty. Immediately, Hito decided to show people the pictures of the perpetrators of Dairo's murder. And if these mercenaries see them, and wherever they're hiding, they won't let them get away. People also started shouting that the knights would definitely answer for what they had done, and they would help them too. And they even started promising each other that they would never forgive those who killed their hero. And then Makoto realized that the shitheads had decided to cover up their crimes. If they wanted to play dirty, he dragged them down to the underworld with him. A few days after the escape, the team gathered at headquarters, and everyone was sitting on pins and needles. But Kingo alone had a different solution to the problems. He was beating the guy up and telling him if he had never been able to get any useful information. And it turns out this guy was a useless piece of shit. Hosajirai stood up and told him to relax because they were already pumped to the max. What good are they to them? Seiya was greatly afraid at this moment, and every time he thought that the people would find out about their secret and what they were doing to them. Hyatt told him to calm down, and he's got it all sorted out. So now they're officially fugitives, and no one's going to take the word of a fugitive. Kingo asked the guy, is he suggesting they just let them go? And the ones who killed Dairo? The magician told him that he had gotten it all wrong. Kingo cried and screamed that they tortured his brother and their friend. He wasn't going to forgive them, and he would surely catch them and show them what real hell on earth looked like. The mage replied that she understood how he felt, but Dairo was the weakest among them. That's why they killed him. Kingo lost his temper and lashed out at her, yelling at her not to dare talk about him like that. But Mage stopped him with the chains and told him to chill already. And she doesn't think these two pose a real threat to them. Kingo replied that it wasn't about that at all. Hito entered the conversation and told them not to fight, because vengeance was written in blood, which means they're hunting them all down. So don't panic. They'll show up sooner or later. Besides, the whole world is now on their side. Their names and faces are already out there, plus there's a reward. And if anyone spots them, they'll know about it immediately. Kingo agreed with what he said. Hyeth continued and said that panicking won't help them in any way. They are still world heroes. They need to prepare to defeat the rest of the Demon Kings. And they can call it a day. After all, the last few days have been particularly hard. They all need a rest, and then they will start again. Kingo lowered his head and replied that he would not forgive them, and he would surely find them. At that time in the morning, the brother and sister woke up under the waterfall. The brother said hello to Mitsuri and asked how she had slept. Mitsuri was happy and replied that it was great. Illusionary magic was something, and she finally didn't have nightmares. Makoto said that was great, and if she rested, it was time for them to move on. If they stayed in one place, they would be found sooner or later. Mitsuri asked her brother, they have become criminals, haven't they? And their faces are already known to everyone. But what should they do? Makoto told her not to worry. He had bought something. And showing her the mask, he said that they hid her face completely, but didn't restrict her view in any way. Mitsuri said that it could really work. And now, even if they ran into enemies, they were unlikely to recognize them. Makoto replied that, for that matter, it was time to move out already. Mitsuri was curious and asked where they were going. Makoto replied that they would go to the dungeon. The dungeon is the realm beyond the gates, completely cut off from the real world. And the laws of ordinary life do not work there, and there is no place for ordinary people. It's very easy to get lost in a dungeon, and it's the perfect place to hide. And according to the dungeon guide I bought in town, there is a dungeon with a poisonous swamp at the top of this mountain. But it's a danger zone, so hunters hardly ever go there. And it's a great hiding place. Makoto remembered the path still, and arriving at the place, he said that here was the gate. And before he did, he promised Mitsuri that everything would be fine, and that no matter what happened, he would always be there for her. Taking his sister's hand, they entered the portal together. Once there, Makoto said, "This is what space is like in this place." Mitsuri said it's an amazing place, and everywhere you look, there's poison. And if they weren't immune to poisons, they wouldn't be able to get in here. But it's too early to relax. After all, some hunters are also immune, and they can easily spot them here. But suddenly Makoto stepped on a strange plant along the way, which immediately attacked him. Makoto said that if you step on a vine, it shoots out seeds. There are traps here too. Mitsuri understood and replied that it was true. It was definitely not a good idea to relax. And after that, she pointed her finger that there was something up ahead. Makoto was surprised and looked at the monsters that were several times bigger than themselves. Makoto told his sister that it was fine, let her leave it to him. The monsters didn't wait and all at once flew at them. Makoto wasn't scared and, using his speed, immediately flew at the monster and delivered a crushing blow. But he didn't stop there. He decided to finish him off. And with his body, he destroyed the monster's head. But in a moment, he was distracted and didn't notice the second monster getting close to him and biting off his entire body. Mitsuri was frightened, for it happened right in front of her eyes. But Makoto immediately recovered and continued the battle. The monster continued to attack and hit hard, but Makoto proceeded to roll up and felt the power of the dungeon monsters, their speed and strength simply unimaginable, but felt that this thing was much stronger than Dairo and Chimera. But Mitsuri applied her seal and shouted to the monster not to hurt his little brother. Makoto immediately felt a surge of immense energy and saw that it was amplifying magic, and the severed arm was moving as well. But then he realized that his whole body felt different, but suddenly he decided to give it a try and ordered his hand to move with his gaze. The hands obeyed his command and began to use magic to move and deliver crushing blows to the monster. In a moment, the hands were in such a place that they grabbed the monster's jaws from both sides and began to tear. Makoto used this moment to destroy the monster once and for all, and immediately flew with his bare fists. After this fight, Mitsuri asked her brother if he was okay. Makoto replied that he was just a little tired, but he was curious about the body control skill. And I noticed that it was thanks to Mitsuri's amplifying magic, and it turned out to be a very useful thing. The month after the escape proved to be very difficult. The second team of knights embarked on their mission and fought the creatures. The elder ordered his men to begin the attack, and released most of the fire attacks. Kingo also went on to fight the monsters, and like a true warrior, he decided to tackle them alone and show the others how it's done. After the kill, Kingo immediately raised his level. The guys were saying at this point that Kingo had taken down the wyvern in no time, and they're nowhere near as good. After the job was done, Kingo decided to have a refreshment, and while eating, he asked where the couple was. The boys asked him to keep it down. Rumor has it bounty hunters are already looking for them. For a bounty like that, they should be found soon. All of a sudden, one of the guys told Kingo that he heard something from a friend, that some guy in a mask had shown up. And a few days ago, his friend who went to the dungeon of the poison swamp seemed to have seen him. And they say he took out a poisonous snake with his bare hands. And like a poisonous snake is a rank-A monster, right? And its venom is so powerful that it can kill a mountain elephant instantly. And he can't imagine anyone being able to defeat her alone, except for Kingo-san, of course. The others replied that even they don't know, maybe the world is full of surprises. And he wouldn't even be surprised if it turned out that there were some they didn't know about yet. Kingo remembered that the victor of the poisonous snake with his bare hands would like to look at this man. Kingo asked, when did this happen? The boy answered that it was 3 days ago, so he might still be in the dungeon. The guys were surprised and replied that the poisonous swamp is a closed area, and it's better not to take any risks. But Kingo didn't like what he said and immediately smacked him upside the head, without even saying a word to him. Kingo asked the guy, didn't he hear that? They're going to the poison swamp. And now, have them start preparing immediately. And even the guy in a mask sounds really interesting. At this moment, Makoto and his sister were still in the dungeon. Mitsuri asked her little brother, is something wrong? Suddenly Makoto sensed something and immediately climbed up the tree to get a closer look. Mitsuri didn't understand initially either, but her brother got a sense of Kingo's presence. Makoto came down from the tree and told Mitsuri that he would be back soon. Mitsuri was scared and asked him not to leave, so he stayed with her. Makoto saw this and told her to calm down. Everything would be all right. They got a lot stronger, and this is their chance for revenge. But don't let her worry so much. Everything will be fine. And after all, it's not like he's going to die. Mitsuri agreed and told her brother to be careful. Unlike Dairo, this monster is a different level. Mitsuri didn't just let her brother go and use the increase in power on him. Makoto got the energy and said he ran. Climbing up the tree, I used my vision enhancement. I saw that Kingo had entered the dungeon. He realized that if he attacked him at the entrance, he might escape, and now he needed to lure him in deeper. He suddenly saw another monster nearby and decided to try to act through it. After cutting his finger, he immediately stuck the knife into the monster's throat and used the illusion technique. He knew that the illusion skill allowed him to temporarily control the perception of a target by using a part of his own body as a catalyst. Makoto did his thing and ordered him to move ahead of the pack. The boys suddenly saw them and told Kingo to look. A pack of monsters were heading straight for them, ready to devour the boys whole. But Kingo wasn't afraid and replied that it would be good for a warm-up. Kingo told his men to get in front and take the fight, for if they did not, he would consider them cowards. After the big one, Kingo overpowered everyone and said it was okay to go on now. The guy asked the man in charge if they could take a little break. Kingo turned around and asked, "Is he a complete wimp?" The boy was frightened and replied that he wasn't and that there was something wrong. Suddenly, the guy began to feel that it became very difficult for him to breathe, and foam started coming out of his mouth. The rest of the guys immediately all started to feel terrible at once. They didn't understand what had happened and asked what was going on. Kingo was surprised, and upon seeing such a thing, asked what was happening to them all. He immediately covered his nose and realized it was the smell of poison. And I saw that even a poison boar doesn't stink like that after death. What the hell is going on here? Suddenly, Makoto decided to use this moment for his attack and immediately flew at him with both feet. Kingo sensed it and dodged. Kingo recognized the guy and said that it turns out it was him, but Makoto immediately pulled out his knife and wounded the monster's arm. Makoto was surprised at the monster catching his arm. Kingo immediately smiled and struck with his other hand. But Makoto had time to use his defense and took everything on a hand block. Kingo told the boy that he was fast and tough, and it seems the rumors about him are true. Kingo was very happy and told Makoto that he liked him. Makoto was surprised and didn't understand how that happened. Kingo went on to say that he adored strong guys, but weak guys make him cringe, and those losers died because they were weak, but he's clearly not one of them, and how he looks to join his team. And if he becomes his subordinate, he will bear the name Shirin. Money, fame, women under the banner of the White Lotus. He will have literally everything. And isn't that a classy offer? And like he said, he respects strength, but he can't stand weak men. And I thought these guys were worth something, but they're completely useless. And it's infuriating just to look at them. And you should have used them instead of a punching bag. And then Makoto asked Kingo why he liked bullying the weak so much. Kingo asked back, how could it be otherwise? I mean, it's fun. And every time, these pathetic lowlifes behave the same way. It's always the same, it's boring. Their faces contorted with horror, that hopeless grimace, and you just can't tear yourself away. But Makoto couldn't help himself, and immediately went after him with his fists, for he remembered all those moments he had experienced with him during the beating. Kingo dodged and grabbed his arm and said it was a good punch. And that's right, they're men. That's how they communicate. First they fight, then they decide. Kingo didn't wait for a retaliatory strike either and flew in with his own attack. But Makoto dodged it and stepped aside. But during the offensive, Makoto used a knife and wounded an enemy. Kingo said that, honestly, letting him go wasn't in his plans, but he's really good. Makoto saw that even though he already realized it, he was just a walking monster. Kingo didn't stop and continued his attacks. And he used a crushing fist. He didn't want to kill this guy. He just wanted to show who's boss. Makoto didn't have time to dodge and again took a hard blow right to his body. He realized that it was the hardest punch he had ever received, which meant he hadn't even been seriously beaten before. Kingo told the guy that it was amazing that he'd endured even that. And it looks like 30% strength isn't enough. He must have been holding back for a very long time. Makoto was also surprised at the fact that it wasn't even the maximum of his strength. Kingo asked the guy, what did he decide to get a gun? But it's even great and can show everything he can do. And now he's ready to take his every blow and clearly prove who's the boss. Makoto used his speed and decided to strike with his knife. Makoto took a few blows and saw that the knife didn't even leave a wound. Kingo asked the guy, did he ever even sharpen that piece of metal? And with that rusty junk, he wouldn't even be able to leave a scratch on it. Makoto was surprised and asked how so. Kingo asked the guy if he'd finally gotten it. He just wouldn't be able to overpower him. But Makoto didn't leave it at that and told him to shut up and started launching different attacks from different directions. Kingo saw it and replied that it was even interesting, and usually after something like that everyone falls to their knees, but he was still holding on, and he likes them. Kingo proceeded to launch his fire leg attacks, and during all of this said that he was liking this guy more and more. Suddenly, Makoto didn't have time to dodge that blow and received a strong fiery blow. Kingo realized that he had gotten a little carried away because this guy had fallen to the ground and couldn't move. The monster was greatly disappointed, for he had just counted on this guy. Suddenly, someone threw a knife at him. Kingo pulled out the knife and realized it was poison. When he saw that the guy had survived, he started saying that it couldn't be. He had literally ripped his insides out, and now he's standing right in the poisonous swamp. So why isn't he starting to decompose? And is he even human? Kingo realized that this was the creature that had killed Dairo. He immediately became angry and used all his strength to kill it. But Makoto was just defending himself and started dodging all his punches. So Kingo decided to use the fire fist punch. Makoto used all of his skills and blasted the battle square and released poison around the perimeter. And taking off his mask, Kingo started laughing and realized that he thought he had. And he had finally found him. Kingo said, who would have thought that this masked guy was him? And withstood his blows not because of his stamina, but because of his regeneration. And the guy can believe he's been looking for him for a long time. And all this time, he's been dreaming of revenge for Dairo. And now that it's all cleared up, let him forget about his offer to join the team, because he'll just kill him. Makoto asked him if he would finish him off, and Kingo thinks a little thing like that would satisfy. And even if you look at it that way, he'll go beyond just killing. Kingo will just suffer afterward. Kingo didn't waste any time and immediately launched his attack. Using his first strike, Makoto simply took over and stayed in one piece. But the punch was a bit crooked, and Kingo's punch just grazed Makoto's arm and left a gash. But the monster wasn't ready to stop there and continued to attack the guy with his powerful blows. Kingo said he wouldn't let him get away and used his two-legged nuclear strike. A closer look showed that the guy had just dodged, and Makoto took advantage of that moment and attacked him back. Making his first punch with his fist, Kingo just stood still and didn't even move. The monster asked the guy, was that all he could do? Kingo used his punch and decided to show him how it was all done. Makoto didn't have time to dodge and was hit hard in the head. Kingo got excited and said that's how you should hit. But then he was surprised that the boy was alive. Kingo loved it and started laughing, saying it was a sight to behold. He thought it was, and his body seized with fear. It embedded itself in his bones. Makoto recovered and felt really bad. Kingo asked the guy if he remembered how he had broken him. Makoto was slightly hurt and slowly tried to run away, but he left his weapon behind. Makoto turned around and mentally ordered his detached arm to act, giving a wave to his hand to get him moving. The arm started to throw hard punches, but Kingo just deflected it with ease. And afterwards, grabbing the guy, said he suspected the guy was up to something, but did he seriously think it could kill him? Kingo didn't talk to him further and delivered the first blow with a two-footed kick, not letting the guy survive and bullying him like before. But lastly, Kingo decided to ask him one question. How did he raise his level so dramatically? But all he got in response was the sound of pain. But Kingo said that if the boy didn't want to talk, he would just beat him until he got tired of it. But then he remembered that since the guy was here, his sister wasn't far away. And as soon as he was done having fun with him, he'd go after her. And he thinks she would make a great pair. Hearing those words, Makoto just started to show his strength and slowly rise up. Kingo kept saying that he would tie her up before he played, but then he noticed that the guy had disappeared, and Makoto was already behind him at that point. Kingo saw that this guy was recovering faster than last time. Makoto had grown a lot since his words about his sister and used all of his powerful attacks on him. Tank noticed all of this and immediately applied his strike. But Makoto didn't stay away either and retaliated in kind. Kingo said he thought the boy had become more agile, but he's still powerless in the face of real power, and even noticed that there was something wrong with him. I mean, his regeneration isn't keeping up with the hits, and I wonder how long his weak defense will last. During the last kick from the monster, Makoto had just lost both of his arms. Kingo had told him that all he was doing was defending himself, and he didn't even think he was that stupid. But Makoto didn't say anything back and just smirked back. Kingo didn't understand at first and asked what he was smirking about. The guy replied that he was just thinking the same thing, and it was a good thing Kingo was a dumb pile of muscle. Kingo, hearing those words, was simply surprised and turned around to see that on the floor lay a pile of the guy's arms, which he had ripped off during the attack. Makoto just ordered them to start moving. And then things started moving, and Kingo started getting different attacks from different directions. But the blows were so strong and fast that he didn't have time to reflect them. Kingo asked, where did such strength come from? He had just been trembling like a scared puppy. Makoto replied, that's right. The fear is deeply embedded in his body, and does he know what's stronger? It's what's bubbling inside of him right now and completely erasing him. Makoto decided to participate in this game too, and wanted to finish him off with his bare hands. He applied his hatred during the first strike, and ended up severing Kingo's arm with one blow. Next, he offered him to see which one of them was stronger. Kingo applied an increase in strength, and told the guy not to get cocky. He's just a fucking punching bag. Kingo launched his attack, and shouted that he would blow him to dust, so that he could never recover again. Makoto saw this, and applied his limbs to get them together, and reuniting with them. He showed his huge and powerful arm, and flying back for a counterpunch, he used his huge arm against Kingo's arm. Having disabled Kingo after that blow, Makoto asked him how would he be in his place. The pain, the hatred, the fear they had endured, he would burn it into his memory and into his body. After a week of battle with Kingo, Seiya and Hito were at headquarters. Seiya asked how the preparations for the next battle with the Demon King were going. Hito replied that they were almost done, and they would have to work even harder if they wanted Dairo's share. Suddenly, Seiya asked, who was Dairo? Hito initially didn't understand his question and froze, and asked him what was he talking about. Seiya remembered Dairo and replied that he was joking, but Hito said that somehow it wasn't very funny. Suddenly he asked, had anyone seen Kingo lately? Hito replied that he thought Kingo was still chasing that couple. Seiya said that those were his best punching bags. The guy confirmed and replied that it was true, but Seiya told him not to worry. Kingo would be sure to bring them back. But Hito replied with anger that these two made him so nervous, and when they came back, they'd be in for a world of hurt. But suddenly the man came running in and addressed them. Hito asked him what was wrong. The man replied that a parcel had just arrived. He couldn't tell me what kind of parcel had arrived and decided to show me himself. Hito was the first to run into the pestilence and yell at everyone to disperse, and asked what happened in the first place. The magician asked him what he thought might have happened. He'd better let him see for himself. And then Hito looked and saw that the package contained only Kingo's limbs, but he recognized them only by their tattoos. After that, they immediately went to the headquarters. The magician used her abilities and said that it wasn't a fake. It's really Kingo. The mage asked with surprise. Someone had actually been able to kill him, but who was even able to do that? Seiya thought for a moment and replied that he didn't know how much effort it took to cut off his hand, or how much you had to hate them. And then he remembered that Kingo had been chasing those two, and it turns out that was their job. Hito asked, how did they beat him? Seiya replied that, honestly, he had been confused about something ever since Dairo's death. But if you looked at it that way, Dairo was weaker than them, but still not weaker than the average hunter. And now, Kingo, he was one of the strongest in the world. And these two were clearly pumped up. Hito said it had been a very short time. But how were they able to become so strong so quickly? Hito asked, and how did they get stronger? Seiya replied that of course, but they were stupidly killing them over and over again, gaining experience. And then he realized and said that couldn't be true. Hito said that the higher the level of a target, the more experience he got for killing it. And I guess they were just killing each other, raising the level in record time. And until they were strong enough to take revenge on them, the magician shouted that it was impossible and suggested that they calm down. And with Kingo, of course, things got ugly. But now they had to decide what to do next, and told Seiya that she had cast a spell on him to calm him down, and he should get some rest. Seiya turned around and replied that he would go get some rest, and Hito asked the mage if she could leave him alone for a while. The mage turned around and replied that it was no problem. Hito walked over to the package and raised his hand, thinking, did they really think they could scare them with this? They sent them this garbage, and they fancy themselves great Avengers, but it's even a little bit cute. And he's of course impressed that they were able to overpower Kingo, and saw the red eyes, and said they were so naive it's even funny. Cracking his eye, Makoto felt the pain and said that they had already found him, and he wished he could get a better look at their hideout, but that wasn't the point. Mitsuri's safety is more important. It's time to head back already. And at least I managed to stop by the store while I was sending them a gift. And eating the local underground delicacies wasn't a good idea, even with poison protection. And besides, now he is closed with shape retention charms, and hopefully it won't get torn or stained. And he found more toys. And he can't forget his present for Mitsuri since she's waiting there alone. At this point, Makoto just decided to head for the dungeon. But when he looked below him, he saw strange people. He realized they were hunters and were chasing someone. But when he looked closer, he saw a girl. He realized that this territory belonged to the White Lotus, and he'd better not get involved. The hunters took her by surprise and said she was caught, and there's nowhere else to run. Makoto decided to join in and said that of course he didn't usually interfere. Hunter turned around and asked, who was he anyway? Makoto didn't answer anything, and immediately punched the first person who spoke. He didn't leave the others alone either, and beat them up. And lastly said that no matter why they were chasing her, let her hurry up and run away. But when he saw the girl open her face, he was greatly surprised and asked what was she doing here. In the dungeon that day, Mitsuri waited for her brother in the tree and asked when he would be back. Suddenly, she felt his presence and saw that her brother had returned. She went downstairs and asked him what was wrong. But looking closely, she was surprised and asked who was this girl. Makoto answered her to just look at her closely. Taking a closer look, Mitsuri was shocked at what she saw and replied that this girl, it was her. But one of the White Lotus Guild's guys, Seiya, was the pride of the guild and was the captain of the battle squad and AS rank swordmaster. Combined with a handsome face, is very popular with women and acts friendly with everyone he meets. He's also the soul of the company, keeping the White Lotus fighting spirit alive. But only the guild knows the truth. He also has a bit of a thing for spending time with girls, and every time they screw up, gives him the right to beat them up. The first time he met Mitsuri, he cheered and said that she was really great. And unlike the others, no matter how much he breaks her, she never dies. And how sweetly she screams after each blow. And as he knows, that's what women were invented for after all. But Makoto didn't like all that, and yelled that he was just a creature and asked why only Mitsuri. Seiya just stuck his sword in his mouth and told him to shut up and sit quietly. And torturing men isn't as interesting. After all, killing, using girls is better suited for this kind of thing. And of course, she'll make him happy with her screams tonight too. One evening, he saw Hito with Dairo and remembered that this room was off limits to everyone but Hito. But he got curious and followed them. But suddenly Hito turned to him and said it wasn't nice to peek. Seiya apologized and replied that it was just Dairo walking into the room with him, and he was curious too. Hito said it was fine. Anyway, they're already done. And does Seiya want to join too? Upon entering this room, Seiya was shocked at what he saw, for the pods were filled with women. Dairo said immediately that Hito had asked him to create clones of Mitsuri. Seiya was surprised and asked in amazement, "Clones?" Hito replied that yes, she does. It has the ability to regenerate. If they can mass produce it, it will pump even faster. And they put White Lotus money into it and used Dairo's genius. But it didn't work. And the generation was incomplete, only enough for 10 deaths. And they don't give experience. Dairo also said they tried to finalize the design, but it didn't work out. So it's easier to throw it away and forget it. Seiya asked the guy, would he throw them all away? Dairo replied that yes, the real one was much cooler. And just use them and throw them away. What's the interest if they can't even react properly? Seiya took a closer look and replied that it was even curious. And he told Dairo to give them to him. Dairo says no problem, but he warns they're really useless. They have no will or emotion. They're just defective puppets following orders. Seiya liked that a lot and replied that it was perfect. Dairo got curious and asked the guy, does he have a thing for dolls? Seiya answered him that he just didn't understand. And he doesn't like dolls, he likes her. To cherish her, to break her, to play with her as he pleases, and turn her into a tool for pleasure. And bullying everything she has, all her rights, her existence is all his now. Hito listened to him and said it's not even an obsession, it's a total addiction. And he's as good as ever. He's the best shit he's ever seen. Makoto brought her into his house and saw his sister getting scared. He asked Mitsuri if she was okay. Makoto asked the girl, what's the output of all these clones at Ishiki's disposal? The girl replied that yes, but she didn't know all the details, but so far he had about a dozen of them already in use. Makoto said, judging from what she said, clones don't have emotions. But she does. But why did that happen? The girl lowered her head and answered that she didn't know herself. It was just that when she happened to see them on TV, she felt warm inside. And then she realized her hatred for Ishikiya Seiya. At that moment, she realized what emotions were and ran away from his mansion. But there are still others like her in his mansion. And right now, they're the only hope at the moment. Makoto told Mitsuri to think, what if they use clones to take out Ishiki? Mitsuri was surprised and asked her brother if he even knew what he was saying. He replied that he didn't even realize that clones had emotions. And next to them, he is vulnerable. This is their chance to kill him. Mitsuri was scared and asked, what if Seiya finds out about this? Does he realize what will happen to them then? Makoto replied that at best he would just kill them. Mitsuri got angry and slapped her brother. Mitsuri told her brother that these girls didn't choose to be born or not, but they're living beings. And he doesn't like the way he talks about them, using them, sacrificing them. Is he even listening to Celia right now? And they're made from his cells, they're her little sisters. And if her sisters are asking for help, shouldn't they help them? Makoto shouted to Mitsuri to think. If they have a clone, they know where the mansion is. And they can sneak in there. It's the perfect chance for revenge. Mitsuri asked her brother if he really wanted to do what they did, use people for his own gain, and then how are they different from them? Makoto realized his mistake and replied that no, that wasn't what he meant. Mitsuri told the girl that they will definitely save them, and that Ishiki, who thinks they're trash, will die. She'll tear him up with those hands. Makoto looks over and says it's time to move out, and he apologizes to her for scaring her. They'll definitely save them. Mitsuri rejoiced and thanked her brother for his words. Immediately, they went to the city. At this moment, Seiya was cursing at his house and asking what was going on here. And why did that brainless doll suddenly run away? And why the hell didn't anyone stop her? And what were they doing in the meantime? Have them go and bring her back immediately. After Seiya gave them orders, they tracked down the runaway and caught her. After capturing her, one of the girls said that she had found her. The girl used the taser to knock the girl out and reported that the target was captured and it was time to return. At this time, Makoto and the girl were following them, and the guy said that they actually chased her when she ran away. The girl replied that it looks like it, And if they figure out it's an original? Makoto replied that there was no need to worry. Mitsuri wouldn't give up that easily. And all the more reason for them to follow. Arriving at the location, Makoto and the girl hid behind a tree in front of the huge house. Makoto said this is what Ishika's mansion is like. It's even bigger than he imagined. The girl replied that their job was to maintain the place. And she asked her brother, "What is it?" Makoto replied that it was his ear. The girl was surprised and asked what other ear. The guy replied that he had applied a body manipulation skill. And if she kept it to herself, he could hear what was going on inside. And if something went wrong, he could react quickly. Mitsuri was happy and told her brother that she understood. Using his ear, Makoto told Mitsuri that he was counting on her. The girls brought her home and told the owner that they had caught number 10. Seiya asked the girl, did she think she could pull shit like that? And why the hell would she want to run away? The girl replied that she was apologizing. She noticed someone suspicious outside and decided to follow him. And she got rid of him, so there's no problem. Seiya got angry and said that if she started doing anything without his knowledge again, she'd just die. But Seiya noticed something and said he had an important conversation with Hyota and have them clean up before he finished. The girl and Mitsuri went to another room, and Makoto told them to clean up. And then opening the door, Mitsuri saw a bunch of girls of her clone and realized she was all dead. The girl started to clean up and remove all the dead bodies. But Mitsuri couldn't stand it and saw that it was just wild and too cruel. Mitsuri walks up to the girl and says they need to run, as long as he can't see. But suddenly, someone hugged her and asked her why they needed to run. The girls replied that it was also their duty to serve their master. And don't they realize what is going on here? The girls said they're disposing of the bodies. Is that a problem? Mitsuri asked why they think it's okay. And they will never be happy in such a place. And what is happiness to them? And that cannot be. But the girl answered that they are the master's slaves. They have no need for will or consciousness. And they serve on command, take punishment on command, provide their bodies on command. No more, no less. They exist to be used by their owner. Just objects. Makoto got angry and said they were just kidding. That's just nonsense. And this is some kind of mistake. Mitsuri replied that it's not a mistake. It's complete nonsense. Mitsuri couldn't stand it all and just hugged the girl and said that she knew herself better than anyone. And they're hurting, aren't they? The girl suddenly told her to let her go. But Mitsuri replied that no, and she wouldn't let go. And Mitsuri started shouting to the others that they say they have no will, but that's not true. And they also say there's no consciousness, but that's also a lie. And they just don't know how to express their feelings. But that's not a problem. They will definitely help them. But suddenly, Seiya burst into the room and caught them while they were chatting and expressing their feelings. Seiya asked immediately who gave them permission to speak. The girl replied to the host that she was apologizing. But Seiya didn't accept their apology and immediately punched Mitsuri and said she was a defective product that needed to be disposed of. During those blows, Mitsuri remembered everything, and even the times he had abused and tormented her. Seiya was suddenly surprised as well and asked her, "What was that look?" and immediately drew his sword. The girl suddenly turned to her master and asked him to stop. But Seiya punched her too and asked, did she decide to order him around? And they've all decided to act willfully. And now he's had enough. Let them all just die. Seiya just pulled out his sword and headed to attack number 3. But Mitsuri saw this and covered her with his body. Seiya was surprised at that moment because of the fact that she had protected her. And now a clone was protecting another clone. But Seiya tasted the blood on his sword, and he found the taste and aroma very familiar. But Mitsuri took advantage of this moment and attacked him with a counterattack. But Seiya reacted quickly and caught her. Seiya was surprised and attacked and said that she was the real Mitsuri, right? Makoto used his hearing and heard them tell him that Ishiki had figured them out. He immediately burst into the room without thinking, and the alarm went off. And Seiya asked the girl, is she waiting for her brother to come rescue her? But either way, he won't get to that place. Mitsuri asked him what he was talking about. Seiya replied that this mansion is just packed with her fighting clones. And besides, they looked just like his precious little sister, and even wondered how he would fight them. Makoto saw that he shouldn't fight them, for he would finish them off. So he had to dodge the attacks. But suddenly, one of them caught him and grazed Makoto's shoulder. But then the 10th one came running and hit her. The girl was surprised and asked number 10 what she was doing. Number 10 replied that he was her real big brother. But the girls surrounded them and said it didn't matter. The master gave orders to destroy the intruder, and it didn't matter if he was her brother or not. And for trying to protect the intruder, they too will become the enemy, and will eventually be destroyed. Makoto decided to join the battle himself, and told the girl it would be okay. Makoto put on a mask and said that as her older brother, he would take care of it. And Seiya just continued to bully Mitsuri, each time he again inflicted the same wounds he had in the past. Seiya, feeling her again, said that as expected, she was just the real thing. And after mocking her, he said she was too beautiful. And he's grateful to the guys who killed Dairo and Kingo. And all this time the anger had not left him from day to day. And she had run away too. But then why had she come back, he asked. And don't let him say he came back to be her toy again. But Mitsuri said he was the one who bullied her and those girls, and stood up in their defense and shouted that she would never forgive him. Seiya asked her if she had decided to take revenge on the man who had tortured her. But he doesn't know how she found out about it, but she really did everything she could to save those puppets. And cutting one in front of her eyes said it must be hard to see. Mitsuri couldn't help herself and just lunged at him. But Seiya dodged and asked, did she really think she could hurt someone like him with that level of skill? But Seiya used his sword afterwards and cut off both of Mitsuri's hands. And now he's going to explain to her that these puppets aren't even alive, and to play with them or kill them depended only on his desire, and proceeded to kill each of them in front of her eyes. And he didn't even know she could have such an angry expression on her face. And that face, she would turn him into a grimace of despair. Mitsuri stood in their defense and took all the blows only on her body. And Seiya didn't even want to calm down. But Mitsuri used her seal in the moment, and suddenly ordered him not to move. Seiya asked her, does she realize the position she's in? These dolls she's so desperate to save, they're completely useless. And why does she waste so much effort on them? They're just mindlessly following orders. He immediately ordered one of them to kneel down, and then he thrust his sword into her chest and asked Mitsuri what was wrong. And did she wish to help her? And now he's ordering her to get on her knees and apologize. Otherwise, let her see what happens, and those dolls will suffer even more. Mitsuri realized she couldn't do anything and asked him to stop. Seiya asked her, was that it? Mitsuri fell to her knees and begged him to stop, and stop torturing those children. Seiya asked, then what should he do? They are his toys, so unless of course she becomes their replacement, he might consider it. Seiya presented the sword in front of her face and told her to lick it. Mitsuri was surprised and asked what he was talking about. Seiya replied that she has no right to refuse, and the only thing she is allowed to say is yes or understand. Mitsuri decided to do his bidding, and Seiya, seeing her approaching the sword, slashed her tongue. After that, Seiya picked up her tongue from the floor and, raising it above his mouth, just gobbled it up and said that it was an exquisite taste. After that, Mitsuri got really scared and decided to run away. But Seiya caught up with her and said he wouldn't let her escape. He tore off all her clothes. Seiya got excited and told her to show him that expression again, and tried even harder to scream. And from now on, she obeys only him. Suddenly, Makoto came up and ripped off her underwear and punched him right away. Makoto immediately gave the clothes to his sister and apologized to her for being late. Mitsuri replied that it was okay. She knew he was coming. Seiya got angry and asked the guy what he did with the clones in the mansion. Don't let him say he killed them. They were made in his sister's image. Makoto replied that he wouldn't kill them. They were his sisters. Although he was a little rough with them, he disarmed them. Seiya wasn't even surprised and told the guy that he was pretty boring. And if he were in his shoes, he'd do something much more interesting. And he would grab him and have his sister right in front of him, and he would do it over and over again. But Makoto thought and said there was a better way. He would chop him into 1,000,000 pieces. Makoto immediately headed to kill him, but Seiya turned around and put his sword up, saying that it was no surprise that he handled the clones. And after that, Seiya used a lightning god flash lightning strike. Makoto didn't even have time to react and received a large wound in his chest. But at that moment, Makoto had time to react, and with his severed hand, he ordered to direct his attack straight at Seiya. Seiya shattered the wall with his body and flew out into the living room, telling the clones that they would be his defense. The clones immediately stood in front of him and began to defend him. Makoto told him that he was hiding behind the girls he used and abused. And it turns out Seiya, the great knight, is just pathetic. Seiya yelled at him to shut his mouth. After all, they're his puppets, and it's none of his business how he's going to use them. Makoto told him to stop talking, and Seiya ordered his clones to grab the guy. Makoto saw that the girls have surrounded him and are trying to finish him off, but he should dodge and not hurt them. But Mitsuri saw this and came out to defend him, but the clones just stood in front of her and wounded her from different sides. Makoto saw this and was scared for her. Before he could react, the clones just grabbed him. Mitsuri screamed for them not to hurt his dear man. Seiya took advantage of this moment and simply plunged his sword into his back with a single blow. Seiya asked his bleeding boyfriend, "Isn't that his precious little sister?" and let him try to protect her. Makoto apologized to his sister for having to endure so much pain. The girl replied that it was her job. Seiya shouted that no, she wasn't. She was just following orders. Makoto turned around afterward at him, and the guy asked, "What was that look? Is he going to run away again?" Seiya launched his attacks and tried to catch the guy. Seiya decided to use a clone and raised his sword above her, shouting that then she would die. Makoto, seeing this, just didn't want to leave her exposed, and running used his body and protected her. Seiya was even more happy about it and said that he wasn't even resisting. Mitsuri saw all of this and was very worried about him, while Seiya said it was the right thing to do, and the more he resisted, the more torture awaited her sis, and used his enhanced sword. Seiya got very close to the guy and used his snake tear, and cutting him in two, said he was anticipating so much fun with his sisters. But Makoto recovered and got out from under him, and asked Seiya what made him think he had won. Seiya was scared and screamed that he was just a walking corpse. The girl was saying at this point that she didn't understand why her brother was putting up with all this to protect them. Makoto asked in response, should there be another reason to protect his sisters? The girls heard his words and all froze for a moment. And Seiya asked, what the hell kind of brother is he? They're just puppets created by White Lotus technology. And no matter how he feels about them, it doesn't change the fact that they're just slaves. And ordered the puppets to kill him. And those who complete the task will receive his favor. But the puppets just stood still and looked at him. Seiya started to get angry and yelled that they were fools, and he actually gave them an order. Let them not ignore him. And then Mitsuri came out and said that now they all realize what they've been going through all this time, and why this man is so protective of them, and who the real enemy is. Seiya realized that they no longer obeyed him and slowly tried to walk away. The clones all at once turned into powerful warriors and all at once said they would protect their little brother. Suddenly, Mitsuri turned around and asked, what is this? The girls replied that they are clones of Kiryu, Mitsuri, and on a genetic level they are identical, but even a complete copy of the original. And so, they began to see her memories. Mitsuri said she saw how desperate her brother was to protect them. Makoto wondered if maybe the body manipulation skill worked. After all, body manipulation is a skill that allows you to manipulate severed body parts. And probably Mitsuri unknowingly shared her memories with the clones that share her exact genetic appearance with her. Seiya got angry and told them they were just puppets. They belonged only to him. They must act like puppets and obey his orders only. The clones responded that they could not carry out that order. They may not understand what family is, but anyone who tries to hurt this man, their brother, whoever he is, he will become their enemy. Seiya decided to stop communicating and said that enough was enough. After all, he was about to chop them to pieces with his sword. Makoto threw a punch at him, and asked if he really thought he was going to let that happen. Seiya didn't have time to react and received a rough and strong punch to the face. He couldn't even do anything. The clones immediately used their weapons and disabled his arms with them. Makoto looked at him and asked him how he could best kill him. Mitsuri stepped forward and asked that they allow her to do so. She promised to take her own revenge on him, and otherwise, she wouldn't be able to feel satisfaction. Seiya was already scared and asked them to stop, and asked them not to touch his dignity. But Mitsuri turned out to be very cruel about it, and swung her hammer and crushed the guy's bells. Seiya just sobbed in pain after that blow and slowly died. But Mitsuri said that wasn't enough, and she would beat him until he completely lost his voice from screaming. But suddenly Clone came up and asked her if she could wait a moment. The clones said they endured unimaginable pain at his hands. But no, not just them. He's maimed and killed dozens of people, and he must suffer the same. But Mitsuri said no. She wanted him to suffer even more. Makoto came up to her and showed her that he understood her feelings and that they had been through all of this. They had been killed and used over and over again, and she finally realized it. And it was a living hell. And in fact, in the basement of this mansion contained a creature from the dungeon. It's been pumped up with White Lotus technology, and he loves everything that moves. Makoto asked, even men? The clone answered that yes. The hunter that had challenged him before was repulsed by the creature. Makoto turned to Mitsuri, and the girl immediately stopped and understood her brother's words and thoughts. And she thought that would be enough for revenge. Makoto told the clone to show them the way. Once downstairs, they chained Seiya up. Seiya was not happy about this and yelled for them to let him go. But Clone and the others were on the other side of the screen and opened the gate of the scary creature. Seiya saw the creature, immediately realized what was going to happen, and asked them not to open. And he didn't ask for that. And with the gates fully open, a modified Orc Emperor stood in front of the guy. Makoto asked with surprise, an Orc Emperor? And as he remembered, it was said that one such could spawn an entire country. Clone said that originally, it was assumed that these creatures would only be interested in females. But through modifications of the White Lotus, the use of drugs and other means, it has evolved into something that will reproduce regardless of gender. Makoto saw her sister getting sick and told her she might not look at such a thing. But Mitsuri ordered her clone to let go of the bolt. Seiya had already said goodbye to his life at this point and was only waiting for the end. The orc moved closer to the guy and looked only into his eyes, and Seiya only tried to scare him away with his feet. The clone saw her brother step aside and asked him if he was okay. Makoto replied that he was, and he was just a little tired, he needed a rest. The clone looked at them and offered to drink tea, and now they could already rest a bit. Sitting quietly over a mug of tea, Clone thanked them for listening to their request. Makoto replied that he planned to kill him anyway, and he didn't care how it would happen. The clone said she was the one who asked her sisters not to be killed, and as a result, no one has been killed since the battle began. And now there are no words to express her gratitude. Makoto replied that there weren't. There was no need to be thanked for this. One way or another, he would want to look around the mansion, and need to look for supplies, maybe find some information about the White Lotus. The clone said she understood, and she'll stay here until the end to oversee everything, and ordered the third clone to show everything to her brother. The third turned around and told her brother to follow her. Going up to another floor, Makoto asked her what they were going to do now. The clone replied that they didn't know yet, and they weren't born naturally, but artificially, and they were unlikely to find their place in this world. Makoto had told her that wasn't true. Even if the whole world is against them, they're always welcome. It doesn't even matter how they were born or what they plan to do. They have the right to live. Clone smiled after his words and replied to her brother that he was right, and then she was going to live her best life. But suddenly at this moment, everything suddenly changed, and somehow the third clone lost its head. Makoto didn't even realize what had happened, and thought, why her? And then Hito appeared in front of him and told the guy that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Hito immediately asked where Seiya was, but Makoto didn't bother to answer him. Next, the guy said it didn't matter. He wanted to celebrate their touching reunion, but apparently he would have to take care of everything. Hito immediately used a long-range attack and cut his Yukai with a single blow. Hito asked him with surprise, had he failed to react? But Makoto was already moving towards him to counterattack. Using his magic fists, he threw the first punch. But Hito easily reacted and dodged it. Hito told the guy he was slow, and slower than he expected actually. After that, Makoto tried another attack, but the guy was faster than him and dodged. Hito decided to attack already and said that his attacks were pointless. As for attacking, that's how it should be done. And with his attack, he destroyed the wall of the house. Makoto lost his arm again in that attack without even feeling it. Afterwards, he told the guy he was a monster. Hito just smiled and replied that it was strange to hear such a thing from an immortal, and told him to make him recover faster. Just then, Makoto applied his powers and saw that his skill was not activated. But Hito said that this sword was enchanted with the holy attribute, and if he hurt him, he wouldn't be able to regenerate for a while. Makoto found himself in an awkward position, thinking what should he do, and Hito is different from the others, and he can't win in this state. But anyway, he just needs to make sure Mitsuri can save herself. And it doesn't even matter what happens to him. Makoto asked the guy, how did he know they were here? Hito replied that Seiya had stopped contacting him. So, he went to find out what was wrong and met him. And luck seems to be on his side. And he's just lucky. And they're not so lucky, he supposes. He wants Makoto to answer his question. He said earlier they all together. And now it's coming out, his sister is here too. Hito started to leave and told him not to worry. He's not going to avenge his comrades. And in fact, he's thankful they killed them. Makoto was surprised and asked what the jerk was talking about. Seiya opened his hand and replied that they had killed them and thus raised his level even more. So if he killed them now, his level would rise even faster. Makoto asked him, is he out his mind? Hito replied that he didn't even know, and with his speed he stabbed the guy's chest. Immediately afterward, his level began to increase. Hito rejoiced and shouted that this was it, and that trembling feeling. It's just beautiful. But Makoto suddenly got his powers again and grabbed his legs with both hands. Makoto threatened him that he would kill him. Hito replied that it was simply impossible, and applied his shrine to the sacred realm. After that, Hito approached him and told him that he was weak, and, with his level, he can't even touch him. Makoto immediately noticed that the regeneration wasn't keeping up with him, but Hito said he didn't care who, him, or his sister. The main thing was getting leveled up in them. And lastly, he said he would give him a choice. If he would obediently follow him, his sister would be safe. And if he resists, he'll tie him up, and he'll grab his little sister too. Makoto asked him if he was lying. Hito replied that, of course, it was up to his decision. Makoto accepted that and told him to take him with him. And he asked him to spare his sister. Hito started laughing and asked the guy, did he have no pride at all? But that's fine. He'll spare his sister, but only this time and for this spectacle. Suddenly Hito changed his mind and looked into his eyes and said he was lying, and he would finish her off, of course. Makoto got angry and yelled no, and immediately flew to fight him again and finish him off once and for all. Unexpectedly after that, clones immediately appeared and all together attacked him from different directions. The clone ordered her girls to protect her baby brother. Hito looked over and wondered if there were more left. Did Seiya really care about them? Clone walked up to her little brother and asked if he was okay, but Makoto told them to stop and said they couldn't handle him. But Hito got there before him and destroyed several clones in one blow without even waving a hand. The girl said she realizes they can't win, but she thinks she can buy enough time for them. Before he could even react, Hito heard their words and immediately set his sights on them. The clone said they saved them from hell, and now it was their turn to help them, and used her teleportation magic. Hito didn't even have time to touch them, and when he opened his eyes, he saw only a bright light in front of him that was slowly fading away. Hito was surprised and asked with surprise, teleportation magic? And realized to use teleportation, you need a lot of magic power like Hosajirai. But the clone who applied it just fell to the ground and didn't move anymore. And Hito said it was a nuisance. Clone got to his feet after that and said that no matter how many were here, he needed to know the abilities they possessed. Hito remembered that he even had a thought, using them and then just throwing them away. And now he understood the very essence of their abilities. And now, super high soul energy, out comes this biological bomb, utilizing the magical power of the original. And in fact, Clone is now very grateful to her brother and Mitsuri. Using that magic stone, she blew up the house. But after him, it was Hosajirai's turn. She is the most beautiful member of the White Lotus Guild, and her appearance leaves no man indifferent. And all of them, without exception, find themselves at her feet. But only those who know her personally know what lies beneath the pretty exterior. Opening the bathroom door, the men would just lose their drinks. For her true face was far more frightening than anything else in the world. 6 months ago, she walked into a room where the system said her identity was confirmed. She walked into the room and was very curious about how many interesting things they had already collected. When she saw that the system was already at 50%, she got very excited. After all, she could use a little more speed. But suddenly she notices that the process has been interrupted. But can't be helped. She uses them and shreds them into small pieces in the propeller. Slowly lowering them straight into the scorcher, she cut off their legs. It made her feel better and happier. And when she saw the fluid going through the trebs, she said the level didn't rise any faster. But it didn't matter to her. She looked at them through the capsule and said she was more interested in getting their liquid inside. She thought immortals were more like zombies. But her skin is so beautiful, so radiant. And it doesn't matter what she does to it if she ends up dead anyway. And her fluid will be like a newborn baby's again. And all she needs is eternal youth. It's every woman's dream. Having eternal youth and attractive appearance. There will be no shortage of rich suitors. And how she wished she had such a natural gift. It would have solved so many pressing problems. And now she was very jealous of her. But now with their liquid, she didn't have to worry about that. Pouring herself a glass, she immediately began to drink. Hosajirai was intensely happy that she would be drinking their liquid. And immediately after the first glass, she began to shine with her beauty. She screamed that it was amazing, and she would need to drink more. She would just need to have fluids flowing every day. At this time, in the present, Hito was in a different place and said it was strange and they were nowhere to be found. And now they had managed to escape after all. But then, out of the blue, she got a call from Hosajirai. Hosajirai asked the guy if he had caught a couple of them yet. Hito replied that they had killed Seiya and escaped again. But Hosajirai got angry and started yelling that she didn't care about that jerk. She wanted that brother and sister. Let her hurry up and bring them. She needs their liquid. Hito replied that he was already trying his best. There was enough blood supply in the vault. Don't let him panic. Hosajirai told him he didn't understand. All she needs is fresh liquid. And if he doesn't hurry, her youth and beauty will end. Hito told her to keep it down. She was young and pretty enough as it was. Hosajirai told him to stop talking her teeth. Let him go and bring them immediately. Hito was surprised and asked since when did she think she could boss him around? If she wanted their blood so badly, then let her go and catch them herself. And he's got other things to do, so she can start. Oh, and stop being angry or you'll get wrinkles. Hosajirai became very angry after his words and easily burned everything in her path with her fingers. Hosajirai said that if everyone is so dumb-headed, I'll have to do everything myself. At that moment, Mitsuri was trying to wake her brother up and bring him to his senses herself. Makoto asked where were they. Mitsuri replied that they were teleported right to the dungeon gate. So amazing. Makoto asked where was everyone else. Mitsuri didn't answer anything and just remained silent. But the guy understood everything and punished himself. He remembered those moments and realized there was nothing he could do. He had promised to help them. But Mitsuri took pity on him and hugged him. The girl tells her that he did everything he could for them. She knows he understands that perfectly well. Makoto replied that what he had said there was just awful. He wanted to make amends. He wanted to help. He wanted to. Mitsuri said it was all right. Through her, Her brother's feelings were transmitted to everyone. And that's why, in the end, everyone took their side. And the feelings that were passed from everyone to everyone let him live for all of them. Makoto became very frustrated with himself and cried out that he was weak, and he wants to become stronger. Mitsuri replied that she did too, and offered him to become stronger together. Setting off, Mitsuri told her brother that while he was unconscious, the White Lotus managed to release another statement about them. Makoto asked, did she mean about them killing Seiya? The girl replied that it wasn't just that. Mitsuri looked and said that the reward for them had been increased tenfold, 5 billion per person. Makoto looked at it and said a very huge amount. Now, there would just be a huge number of people looking for them, and they need to get out of the dungeon. There could be traces of teleportation magic here. And suddenly seeing a white light in front of her, Mitsuri said that was the way out. But Makoto told her to stop. Slowly looking closer, he saw that some strange monster had suddenly appeared at the end of the tunnel. But on the other side was a real huge and strong dragon that sensed them. Upon seeing the dragon, Makoto grabbed his sister, and Mitsuri yelled to run to the dungeon sooner. But Makoto said no, and said they should run outside. As they stepped into the light, they saw a dragon preparing to release its fiery flames into the tunnel. The dragon sensed their presence fully and released a huge pile of fire from its mouth. Mitsuri asked, why is the legendary creature outside the dungeon? Makoto took his sister and said they couldn't beat him and needed to run. The dragon chased them and tortured them with fire. Suddenly Makoto saw that there was a town nearby. He had heard that dragons didn't touch human settlements, but here he was wrong. The dragon immediately burned down the house in front of their eyes. Makoto saw that this dragon has attacking power, and its flame has a temperature of over 3,000 degrees, able to melt absolutely everything. And his scales can't even be penetrated by cannonballs. And the only chance to win is when several top guilds unite. Makoto said that they should find a way to escape, and suggested to Mitsuri that they do it together. Mitsuri asked her brother what to do. They would never make it, but Makoto replied that they should kill the dragon and level up. The boy asked his sister, had she forgotten her promise? That you would fight even a dragon if it would help to defeat Hyota. Makoto clenched his fist and told his sister that he would go in from the left. Mitsuri understood and replied that she would go in from the right. Seeing the dragon's mouth, Makoto shouted that he was preparing to attack, and put on his mask and used physical reinforcement, and shouted to the dragon not to think he was the only one who could fight in the sky. Makoto realized that dragons were living creatures too, and so he must find his weak spot. After throwing a few strong punches, he realized that the dragon's weak point was its head. Mitsuri also shouted that they had a chance, and pulled out her knife and plunged it straight into the dragon. The dragon turned around and slashed its tail at her. Makoto saw this for himself, and went at it with his own strength, and hit it just as the dragon was about to attack. Mitsuri saw this too, and yelled out that she was here. The dragon turned on her after that and attacked with fire. But the girl used defense and tried to reflect. But suddenly she noticed that the dragon's flame had changed, and realized it was powered by magic. Here she remembered all the moments with the clones and told herself that she had to be stronger for their sake. Without thinking, she took a knife in her hands and cut off her arm. She looked at Makoto and said it wasn't over. Makoto said, as expected from dragon flames, this was the first time his bones had simply melted. Makoto didn't let the wound spread further down his body, and ripped it away with his bare hands. After that, he gave the order to his hand for them to deliver their blows. The dragon was unable to dodge and was injured. Makoto was only at a distance and giving orders. Mitsuri also saw that this magic was more powerful, and decided to try it too. Taking matters into her own hands, she immediately used the fire-black flame magic. The dragon didn't expect it and started attacking back again. Makoto's thoughts immediately gave orders to his hands to put everything in its place. He realized that the force of his fist alone would not be able to break the dragon's scales, and it was necessary to deform his body. Next, strike at one point. Making a sharp weapon from his hands, he delivered a devastating blow to the dragon's head. Suddenly after that, Makoto only saw his level start to increase. Mitsuri saw the same thing in front of her eyes. Makoto got excited afterward and said they had done it, and it was a good job they did. Mitsuri's only response was that she was going to throw up. Makoto remembered and asked Mitsuri what kind of power she used. The girl replied that after being touched by the dragon flame, she felt her abilities improved. Makoto cheered for her and said it was amazing. But still, how did this dragon end up here, the boy thought? I mean, it wasn't here before, or else someone was running it. Mitsuri was surprised and asked, did they? Makoto answered, his eyes glittering with a pale pink light. And that was the magic of hypnosis. That would explain his behavior and his appearance here. Mitsuri asked, but who was cruel enough to do such a thing? It must be that woman, Hosajirai. Suddenly looking up at the sky, they saw that the birds were scared of something and were trying to fly away from here. But looking closer in the distance, they saw that the dragons were coming at them and their masters were on top of them. Immediately, two guys descended from a dragon right in front of them and were already holding weapons. Makoto looked over and saw that these people were being manhandled as well. The mercenaries immediately wouldn't talk to them, and one of them attacked Mitsuri. But Mitsuri reacted in time and deflected his blow. But Makoto didn't just let it go and threw his fists at him. And after this, he saw a white light appear in front of them, and raising his head, he saw that the dragon would attack them. Releasing his flame into them, Makoto picked up his sister and threw himself over to the other side. Makoto said that this dragon had a more powerful breath than the one they had seen before. Mitsuri asked if that meant their location had been revealed. Makoto replied that he assumed it did. Looking around, he saw that a bunch of mercenaries had surrounded them from different directions, and they were found. Makoto told his sister that he was taking on the dragons, and she would let her deal with the hunters. Mitsuri asked, they're just being driven, right? Makoto replied that yes, but after the last fight, there was almost no strength left. And he tells her to keep her head down, and he'll handle them on his own. Mitsuri wondered if this was normal. After all, she was letting him take it all on his shoulders again. Just then she remembered everything again and told her brother to stop. And she had relaxed too much under his protection. But this is wrong. And now she decided that she would no longer hide behind her back. She stepped forward and said that this was their common cause. Mitsuri immediately took on the guys and used her fire bullets against them. And Makoto just decided to skip between them and get to the dragons so they wouldn't interfere with the battle. But Makoto saw that there was a dragon behind them that was about to attack, and got right in front of it. After tearing his body apart, Makoto didn't hesitate and used body manipulation, and directed his second body part at the dragon. The dragon didn't think twice and just ate his body. And after that, Makoto used his poison. The dragon felt an immediate pain inside him, and slowly died. And Makoto said, apologizing, they don't have time at all. But the system didn't leave him unrewarded and immediately raised his level a few notches higher. Makoto rejoiced and said that they needed to get this over with as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, Mitsuri was fighting the mercenaries, and she was doing very well. Mitsuri dodged their blow every time, and even managed to attack back. But suddenly Mitsuri yelled out that there were too many of them, and she was out of time. But suddenly, in a moment, a mercenary came up from behind and thrust his sword into her. After that, they all came at her at once and started slashing her from different directions. She realized that there were too many of them, and she would not be able to handle them. But she pulled herself together and decided that she needed to focus, and used a blast of black flame. Mitsuri blasted them all at once, and said enough is enough. And if you start treatment immediately, you can avoid the consequences. She saw with her own eyes that they were enslaved by the mania of manipulation, and they follow orders, even with one foot in the grave. But suddenly she saw the mercenaries start to slowly walk away. She thought it was strange. Makoto also asked what was going on in the first place. Suddenly, the mercenaries fell into formation and another portal opened in front of them. Mitsuri immediately said, as it was supposed to be her. And after saying that, Hosajirai came out of the portal and said that she had found them. Makoto asked, did she come alone? And even without Hyota? Hosajirai replied that she alone was enough to handle them. Makoto asked her why she had come here. Hosajirai replied that it was too tiring to maintain hypnosis at that distance. She was tired. Makoto said she was pretty brave to come to them without Hyota. The girl replied that she thought she would be quite enough for them. Mitsuri couldn't stand it and yelled for them to stop talking already, and immediately attacked her with her black flame. But Hosajirai used her magic before her attack to place mercenaries to take over everything. The mage said it was convenient, living walls. Mitsuri couldn't stand it and asked what human lives meant to them at all. Hosajirai asked with surprise, human life? But after the mercenaries died, she replied that it was exactly nothing, because she's strong and beautiful. She has everything she wants, and everything else is just garbage to her. Mitsuri shouted that all human lives are equally important. Hosajirai replied that she was a naive little babe, and how sweet that is, just like an innocent little flower, and she would be very sorry to spoil it. Hosajirai decided not to talk further and used her thunder beam. From her attack, everything around began to spin, and even the rock could not withstand such pressure. It ended up disconnecting brother and sister in different directions. Makoto wasn't even thinking about himself at that moment, only his sister. But Hosajirai said she would worry about herself first. Makoto suddenly turned in her direction, and Hosajirai kissed him on the lips, applying hypnosis. Mitsuri was downstairs at that moment and saw that her brother was now out of breath. After all, Hosajirai had hugged him like her toy. Hosajirai said she was so curious. How can they keep young forever without doing anything for it? After that, she also started licking him with her tongue. But Mitsuri saw this and jumped on her and yelled at her not to touch her brother. But pulling out her knife, she tried to finish her off. But Hosajirai just took it and put her brother in front of her. Mitsuri was just confused after that and asked how so. Hosajirai just started to say that she had stuck the knife into her brother's stomach with her own hands. But Mitsuri immediately came to her senses and attacked her again. But Hosajirai used Makoto and attacked back with it. Mitsuri had time to react and was yelling at her brother to wake up. Did he forget what they were fighting for? Hosajirai interrupted her and replied that it was useless, and the hypnosis could only be removed by her. There was another option to kill her, though. After her words, she immediately ordered Makoto to start a fight with his own sister. Makoto understood the order and struck with his leg. Mitsuri tried to run away from him, but Makoto was so fast that he easily caught up with her. He began to strike his own sister. Hosajirai asked her how is she doing now? How is the feeling of hatred from her favorite sibling? Mitsuri realized at this moment that if she didn't start fighting back, he would win. Mitsuri apologized to her brother one last time and stabbed herself. But suddenly Makoto spoke and addressed her by name. Mitsuri thought he had come to his senses. But after that, Makoto just distracted her and flew to throw punches. But then Mitsuri realized it was wrong. She shouldn't have to fight her own brother. Makoto just walked up to her after that and grabbed her by the neck and lifted her into the air. Mitsuri told him she didn't like that. At that moment, Mitsuri remembered everything and told her brother one last time that they promised each other to become stronger together. Hosajirai asked her what she was muttering there. Mitsuri got angry and shouted hatefully that she would kill her. And she'd said it before 1,000,000 times. Hosajirai felt the tension and ordered Makoto to kill her. But Mitsuri walked over her brother, cutting off his hands, and lastly used a black flame blast on him. Hosajirai immediately said that it was getting dangerous here, so she decided to open a portal to escape. And Mitsuri still thought she should stay behind her brother. He's big and brave, he can protect her. However, this is wrong, and now she has to defeat her brother and then get to that wish. Mitsuri saw during her attacks that his spirit can still be felt through the attacks. And she's sorry that she's weak and he always saved her. But it's okay now. She'll take care of him. At least she hopes she's strong enough. And then every time she hit her brother, she leveled up, and she got stronger and stronger. Mitsuri hugged her brother and promised that for his sake, she would become strong. and used her explosion. Hosajirai looked at all this and asked, "Is she crazy? And at least she is fluid. But she still can't see him, and that's worrying. And she can't wait for him to come back." And suddenly out of the smoke, she heard a voice telling her that she had made a mistake, and if she decided that she couldn't fight her brother. The day they escaped from hell, they killed each other many times. And now she's ready to fight her. When Hosajirai saw her body, she was shocked with fright and asked what kind of magic was this. Makoto came out after her and thanked her sister. And he said he knew she could handle it. And now, it was her turn to show who was really strong.